Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: everything you have ever longed for is already yours. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. The only question is, can you accept it in the depths of your being? The secret to manifesting is shockingly simple, yet profoundly ignored. Assume it's already done. You see, imagination is not a fanciful daydream. It is the very power of creation. What you dare to claim inwardly will harden into fact outwardly. The world is nothing more than yourself pushed out. When you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, you shift your identity. You no longer wait, you no longer beg, you no longer hope. You live as if. You walk in the awareness that your desire is accomplished. This inner conviction bends reality to your assumption, for the outer world must conform to the inner vision. How do you practice this? Tonight, as you drift into sleep, enter that sacred state between wakefulness and slumber. There, rehearse the scene that would imply your wish is fulfilled. Feel it, touch it, hear it. Persist in that assumption until it becomes natural. The more real it feels within, the sooner it crystallizes without. Stop postponing your miracle. Stop measuring the world by appearances. Assume boldly, confidently, and unwaveringly it is done. And as you hold fast to this inner knowing, the outer must bow. So I say to you now, dare to imagine greater. Dare to assume it real. And watch as life itself rearranges to mirror the truth of your assumption. Imagination creates reality because every outer condition is first born within. What you picture in the secret chambers of your mind is the blueprint from which life constructs its forms. The world you see is nothing more than thought objectified, an echo of your inner conversations and images. When you imagine vividly, with feeling and conviction, you set in motion unseen currents that shape people, events, and circumstances to align with your vision. It is not wishful thinking, but the creative act itself. For imagination is the divine spark that molds substance into experience, silently commanding reality to obey. Manifesting begins by assuming the wish is already fulfilled, because the mind cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. When you take on the feeling of your desire, as though it is already yours, you impress this state upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being the creative power, expresses it into form. The moment you step into that inner reality, you no longer operate from longing or lack, you move with the certainty of possession. This shift is not about forcing outer circumstances, but about aligning your inner state with the outcome desired. By dwelling in the assumption that it is already accomplished, you bypass doubt, time, and resistance, for you are no longer waiting. You are living it now. Each thought, action, and emotion then begins to flow from this new identity, subtly guiding you and influencing others to reflect your conviction. The law responds not to effort, but to belief, not to hope, but to assumption. To manifest, you must feel from the end, to occupy it so fully in consciousness that it becomes natural. And once it feels natural, it must reveal itself in the outer world. For consciousness alone is the cause. The world is your assumption made visible, because every condition, every encounter, and every circumstance in your life is nothing more than the projection of your inner state. What you hold to be true within yourself, whether consciously or unconsciously, sets the stage upon which your experiences unfold. Assumption is not mere thought. It is the deep acceptance of something as fact, and once accepted, it shapes the lens through which you view life. That lens, in turn, determines your reactions, your choices, and even the way others respond to you. In essence, you are never experiencing life directly, but always through the filter of what you assume to be real. If you assume lack, the world will present evidence of scarcity. If you assume abundance, opportunities and resources will appear to match your conviction. This is why two people can live in the same environment, yet experience completely different realities, for each is living out the truth of their assumption. Your outer world is not separate from you. It is your consciousness externalized. Every detail, from the smallest incident to the greatest achievement, is woven from the fabric of your beliefs and expectations. To change the world you see, you must first change the assumption you hold within. For reality has no choice but to mirror the inner state you most persistently occupy. Stop waiting. Live as if now, for waiting implies separation from your desire. while living as if declares its presence. The act of waiting keeps the fulfillment at a distance, always tomorrow, always someday, never here, never now. To live as if means to assume the state of the wish fulfilled and walk in it with conviction, moving through your days as though what you long for is already woven into your reality. This is not a game of pretending, it is a conscious shift of identity, where you no longer see yourself as someone striving, but as one who already possesses. When you live as if your thoughts naturally align with that new reality, your emotions rise to meet the joy of possession, and your actions flow from confidence rather than doubt. The power lies in the present moment, for the only time creation can happen is now. Every time you delay by thinking, someday, you affirm absence. Every time you live as if you affirm presence. Life then organizes itself around that assumption, rearranging circumstances, people, and opportunities to reflect your new state of being. The universe does not respond to hesitation, it responds to conviction. Stop waiting for conditions to be perfect before you feel successful, loved, wealthy, or free. Begin to carry yourself in thought, word, and deed as though it is already so. The tone of your inner conversations will shift, and as they shift, so will the experiences mirrored back to you. Living as if now is the bridge between desire and fulfillment, the inner stance that dissolves time and opens the way for manifestation. It is the declaration that the future is not to come, but is already here, clothed in the power of your assumption. Identity shifts when you assume success, because assumption is not about repeating words or visualizing outcomes alone. It is about stepping into an entirely new version of yourself and allowing that version to take root in consciousness. Success is not something you chase, it is something you embody, and the moment you assume yourself to be successful, your inner state reorganizes to match that conviction. Identity is the foundation of all behavior, and behavior is what shapes results, so when identity changes, life itself must change. A person who assumes success no longer approaches challenges with hesitation, but with certainty, seeing obstacles not as threats, but as opportunities to demonstrate their power. The tone of thought, the quality of inner conversation, and the emotional atmosphere all transform, for you cannot carry the vibration of success inwardly without radiating it outwardly in countless subtle ways. When you assume success, you stop identifying with failure, doubt, or lack, and instead you claim the inner authority of one who knows the outcome is already secure. This assumption alters the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you interact with others. People sense the shift, and circumstances begin to align, for the world always mirrors the truth of the self you are being. Even before results are visible, the identity shift makes them inevitable, because your consciousness is no longer reaching forward, but expressing from the end. You think differently, you choose differently, you persist differently, and the environment bends to that persistence. This transformation is not forced, it is natural. When the assumption of success is taken deeply enough, it becomes effortless to think, feel, and act in alignment with it. The inner dialogue changes from, "Will I make it?" to, "This is who I am." The subconscious accepts this identity, and since the subconscious creates reality, the outer world must conform. Identity is the soil from which every action and outcome grows. An assumption is the seed planted in that soil. By assuming success, you water the seed with faith and nourish it with imagination until it blossoms in physical form. The old self tied to limitation gradually dissolves as the new self emerges, and in that emergence lies the secret of manifestation. To assume success is to declare, inwardly and silently, that you are already the person you desire to become. And once that declaration is made and lived from consistently, reality cannot help but bear witness to the truth of your assumption. Use the state between waking and sleep for vivid inner rehearsal, because this interval, known as the state akin to sleep, is the gateway to the subconscious mind, the creative workshop where all impressions are received and given form. In this delicate borderland between awareness and slumber, the conscious mind relaxes its grip and the subconscious becomes highly receptive, open to suggestion without resistance. Most people pass through this state thoughtlessly, drifting into sleep with worries, regrets, and random images. And in doing so, they unknowingly impress those conditions upon the subconscious. only to see them reflected in their waking life. But when you deliberately occupy this state with intention, you step into the role of conscious creator, planting seeds of desire in the fertile soil of the subconscious, knowing that what is planted there must eventually grow into outward experience. Inner rehearsal in this drowsy condition is not mere imagination, but creative participation in the reality you wish to experience. The secret lies in engaging the senses inwardly with conviction, feeling yourself already in possession of what you seek, hearing the voices that would congratulate you, touching the object of your desire, and seeing the world as it would appear if your wish were fulfilled. In this state, the line between imagination and reality blurs, and the subconscious accepts the imaginal act as fact, setting in motion the unseen currents that bring it to pass in waking life. It is not the effort or the length of time spent in this practice that matters, but the intensity and naturalness of the feeling. A single scene, vividly and lovingly rehearsed, is enough to impress the subconscious if it is entered into with genuine conviction. For example, if your desire is for success in a new role, you might imagine yourself shaking hands with a colleague who congratulates you, feeling the warmth of their hand, hearing the tone of their voice, and sensing the joy of accomplishment. If your desire is love, you might rehearse the feeling of being embraced, of hearing words of affection spoken to you, of knowing deep within that the bond is already real. The key is to create the imaginal scene that implies fulfillment and to surrender into it until it feels natural, until you drift into sleep carrying that state with you. Each night provides an opportunity to rewrite the script of your life, to release the day's appearances and occupy the reality you wish to embody. The conscious mind may argue, protest, or doubt while fully awake, but in this twilight state those barriers dissolve, and the subconscious receives your assumption without question. What you accept in this moment becomes the foundation of tomorrow's experience. By making this a nightly discipline, you gradually shift your identity and align your entire being with the outcome desired, until it ceases to feel like a wish and instead becomes the most natural expression of who you are. This practice requires patience, persistence, and faith, yet it is the surest method for impressing the subconscious, for it bypasses all resistance and moves directly into the seat of creation. To use the state between waking and sleep is to stand at the doorway of infinite possibility, choosing consciously what you will carry into the depths of mind. Knowing that what is carried there must be expressed in the outer world, feeling makes imagination real and powerful, because imagination by itself, if left as a cold, detached picture, remains a shadow, a fleeting image with no substance. It is feeling that breathes life into the picture, clothing the invisible form with vitality so that it can be impressed upon the subconscious mind. The subconscious does not respond to idle daydreams or half-hearted thoughts. It responds to the conviction of feeling. Every great change in life begins not with the intellectual act of thinking about it, but with the emotional act of assuming it with feeling. You may imagine a scene 1,000 times, but if you do it without the depth of feeling, it is no more than a passing sketch, easily forgotten and quickly dismissed. Yet a single moment of imagination fused with genuine feeling has the power to alter the course of your entire life. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, between the unseen world of thought and the manifested world of form. When you imagine vividly and feel the reality of your wish, you impress it upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being the creative force of your life, must bring forth its likeness. This is why Neville Goddard declared that assumption is fulfilled not by mere thought, but by feeling the reality of the wish fulfilled. Feeling is acceptance. Feeling is consent. When you feel something to be true, you are no longer questioning it, you are no longer hoping for it, you are embodying it, and in that embodiment lies the creative power. Consider the way memory works. A memory that is vivid and charged with emotion feels real even years later. So real that it can alter your present mood, as though the event were happening again. That same mechanism works with imagined experiences. If you imagine with intensity and evoke the feeling of the event, the subconscious accepts it as reality. It cannot distinguish between what is physically experienced and what is vividly felt. This is the key to creation, For once the subconscious accepts the imaginal act, it sets into motion the circumstances, events, and connections necessary to give it physical form. Feeling also serves as the magnet of your inner state. Whatever you feel deeply is drawn into your experience. If you dwell in feelings of fear, lack, or doubt, your imagination will create scenes that reinforce those emotions, and your outer world will reflect them. If you cultivate feelings of joy, love, confidence, and fulfillment, your imagination will naturally form scenes that embody those states, and the outer world will conform. This is not superstition but law. The law is simple. What you feel deeply and consistently, you attract into being. The practice, then, is to move beyond intellectual imagining into emotional participation. Do not merely see the picture of your desire in your mind, but enter into it, live in it. Touch it, hear it, savor it, and most of all, feel it as though it were happening now. If you desire abundance, do not merely see numbers on a screen. Feel the relief, the security, the freedom that abundance brings. If you desire love, do not merely picture a partner. Feel the warmth, the affection, the joy of companionship. If you desire success, do not merely visualize an achievement. Feel the pride, the satisfaction, the confidence of one who has already attained it. This inner rehearsal with feeling is the creative act itself. Each time you enter into the scene with sincerity, you are planting a seed in the subconscious, and each seed must grow according to its nature. The stronger the feeling, the deeper the seed is planted, and the sooner it will break through into visible expression. You do not need to concern yourself with how it will happen, for that is the domain of the subconscious and the unseen intelligence of life. Your task is to imagine with feeling, to assume with conviction, and to persist in that inner state until it becomes natural. When feeling saturates imagination, the inner vision ceases to be a wish or a fantasy. It becomes a reality within you. And because inner reality and outer reality are but two sides of the same coin, what you accept within must eventually be mirrored without. Feeling makes imagination real and powerful because it transforms possibility into certainty, turning the invisible dream into the inevitable fact. Persist until assumption becomes natural, because the creative process is not a single act of imagination, but a steady, unwavering dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled until it becomes the most natural feeling in the world. The human mind is shaped by repetition, and the subconscious is molded by the consistent impressions we offer it. When you assume something once, you plant a seed, but when you persist, you water that seed, nourish it, and protect it until it takes root and grows. Many abandon their assumptions too quickly, shaken by appearances or discouraged by the delay of visible results. Yet the law of consciousness is sure, and what you hold faithfully within must eventually be expressed without. Persistence is the key that bridges the gap between inner creation and outer manifestation. At first, assumption may feel unnatural because the outer world shows no evidence of its truth. The senses argue the rational mind objects, and old beliefs rise to contradict the new vision. This is the moment when persistence is required. To persist is to continue in the assumption despite appearances, to live inwardly from the end even when outwardly nothing has changed. It is to rehearse the scene of fulfillment until it feels familiar, to return again and again to the inner vision, until it ceases to feel like imagination and begins to feel like memory. Once the subconscious accepts it as natural, the manifestation is inevitable. Naturalness is the test of reality. What feels natural to you is what you inevitably express in your life. This is why persistence matters, for assumption that feels forced or artificial cannot be sustained, but assumption that has been rehearsed with feeling becomes effortless. Think of how a skill is learned. At first it feels awkward, unnatural, and uncertain, but with repetition it becomes automatic. In the same way, assumption practiced consistently becomes the natural state of mind, and when it is natural, it flows without effort. This is when the creative power of the subconscious takes over, bringing the assumed reality into physical expression. Persistence also neutralizes doubt. Doubt is nothing more than a habit of thought, and habits are broken by the introduction of a stronger habit. When you persist in the assumption of your desire, the strength of repetition wears down the old patterns of disbelief. Over time, the feeling of the wish fulfilled grows stronger than the feeling of lack. And once that tipping point is reached, the new state becomes dominant. You no longer try to believe, you simply know. It feels obvious, inevitable, and unquestionable. To persist is not to struggle or to strain, but to gently return again and again to the inner state of fulfillment. Each time the outer world tempts you to deny your assumption, you turn inward and remind yourself of the truth already established within. You rehearse the scene once more. You feel the reality once more. You affirm the identity once more. This is persistence, the steady refusal to abandon the inner vision. And with each return, the assumption becomes more solid, more real, more natural. It is in persistence that you train your consciousness. The outer world is the mirror, but the inner world is the cause. By persisting, you are teaching the subconscious who you are and what reality must reflect. You are not demanding results. You are embodying them. You are not asking when or how. You are living from the certainty that it is already done. The more you persist, the less you are swayed by appearances, for appearances lose their hold over one who knows the truth within. Imagine a sculptor shaping a statue. Each strike of the chisel may seem small, but together they reveal the form hidden within the stone. Persistence in assumption is the same. Each return to the vision shapes the subconscious, carving away doubt, fear, and disbelief until only the form of fulfillment remains. The process is not dramatic but steady, and in that steadiness lies its power. Eventually, the state of fulfillment becomes second nature, so ingrained that you no longer need to remind yourself, you simply are. And when you simply are, the outer world must conform, for it is powerless to resist the truth of your inner being. Persist until assumption becomes natural, because naturalness is creation fulfilled. What you can assume easily, without effort, without conflict, is what you live. By persisting, you move from effort to ease, from hope to certainty, from imagination to fact. The seed becomes a tree, the dream becomes reality, and the assumption becomes the life you live. Appearances are shadows. Inner conviction is truth, because the world you see with your physical senses is not the origin of reality, but the reflection of what you hold within. Outer circumstances may appear solid, immovable, and beyond your control, yet they are only projections of deeper convictions impressed upon the subconscious mind. Just as a shadow has no life of its own but merely reveals the shape of the object that casts it, so too do appearances have no independent power. They are the echo, not the cause, the effect, not the source. The cause lies always in consciousness, and more specifically, in the assumptions and feelings you persistently hold as true. The error most people make is mistaking the shadow for the substance, believing appearances to be final. When difficulties arise, when lack is visible, or when failure seems present, the tendency is to bow before these appearances as though they dictate the limits of what is possible. Yet to do so is to surrender creative power, for appearances are nothing more than yesterday's beliefs materialized. To focus on them is to give energy to the old state of being and to perpetuate its expression. Inner conviction alone has the power to overturn appearances, for it is conviction that molds the unseen substance of life into new forms. Inner conviction is truth, because truth in this sense is not what is seen, but what is felt to be real within. If you can hold conviction in the face of contradictory evidence, you prove your mastery of consciousness. Consider the seed planted in the soil. For a time there is no visible evidence of growth, yet the gardener holds conviction that the seed is alive, that it will break through and bear fruit. If the gardener judged only by appearances, he would abandon the soil, believing nothing is happening when in fact everything is already in motion beneath the surface. So it is with assumption and faith. Conviction sustains you while appearances deny, until the denial fades and the conviction takes form. Every great achievement, every transformation, every miracle has sprung from one who dared to trust inner conviction above outer evidence. The visionary, the inventor, the dreamer, all have seen beyond appearances, holding fast to an inner reality invisible to the crowd. Appearances said it could not be done, yet conviction whispered that it was already so. It is not arrogance to hold to your inner truth. It is alignment with the law of consciousness. For consciousness is the only reality, and what you accept as real within must eventually crystallize without. To live by appearances is to live as a slave to circumstance, tossed about by the shifting winds of conditions. To live by conviction is to stand rooted in creative power, shaping conditions to your will. Appearances may declare that you are limited, but conviction affirms that you are free. Appearances may suggest lack, but conviction insists abundance is yours. Appearances may portray rejection, but conviction knows love already surrounds you. Each time you choose conviction over appearance, you assert your dominion as the creator of your experience. This is not denial of the senses but mastery over them. Denial is weak resistance, but conviction is conscious authority. You do not pretend appearances are not there. You recognize them as shadows, temporary reflections of past states, destined to dissolve as you persist in a higher assumption. To argue with appearances is futile, for they are already formed. But to replace them with a deeper conviction is power, for the conviction will give birth to new appearances. The process requires persistence and courage, for the senses claim loudly, and the world seems to demand submission to what is visible. Yet the secret lies in quiet certainty, the inner knowing that truth is not out there but in here. It is not about forcing change, but about assuming it inwardly with such confidence that the outer world has no choice but to bend. Conviction is a calm assurance, a steady inner agreement that what is desired is already accomplished. Think of a dream. While dreaming, the scenes and figures appear real, yet upon waking you realize they were shadows cast by the mind. Life itself operates by the same principle. What you call reality is a dream of consciousness, and the figures within it are shaped by your inner state. Change the conviction, and the dream must change. Refuse to be deceived by appearances, and you hold the key to reshaping the dream at will. The shadows of life are transient, but conviction is enduring. Conviction is the rock upon which new worlds are built, the silent lawgiver that commands appearances to obey. When you understand this, you no longer tremble at what the eyes behold, for you know the truth lies deeper. You turn inward, anchor yourself in conviction, and rest in the certainty that appearances must yield. Appearances are shadows. Inner conviction is truth, because truth is what creates while appearances merely reflect. To build life upon appearances is to build upon shifting sand, but to build upon conviction is to build upon solid rock. Conviction is the hidden power that sculpts destiny, the unseen hand that moves events, the silent decree that governs reality. What you assume with conviction becomes your truth, and what becomes your truth must appear as fact, for the shadow has no choice but to follow the substance that casts it. Dare boldly. What you assume inwardly must appear outwardly, because assumption is not a weak, passive act of thought, but the very law by which reality is formed. Life is not responding to wishes or vague hopes, but to the firm and daring assumptions you hold within the depths of consciousness. To dare boldly is to step beyond the limitations of reason, beyond the arguments of appearances, beyond the timid whispers of doubt, and to embrace the audacity of declaring your desire already accomplished. Boldness is the courage to claim inwardly what the outer world has not yet confirmed, knowing that the outer must eventually conform to the inner decree. The timid soul waits for conditions to change, for evidence to appear, for circumstances to align before daring to believe. The bold soul knows that conditions, evidence, and circumstances are nothing more than reflections of past states of consciousness, and that the only true cause is within. To wait for proof is to delay creation indefinitely, but to assume boldly, without evidence, is to set the creative process in motion at once. The bold assumption is the seed, and though the seed may be invisible for a time, it is already alive, already working, already pressing toward expression in the outer world. Every invention, every discovery, every act of greatness has begun with someone daring to assume inwardly what others deemed impossible. The Wright brothers dared to assume that man could fly, even when appearances declared it a dream fit only for fantasy. Edison dared to assume that light could be harnessed and sustained, though failures appeared again and again. Great leaders, thinkers, and creators have always lived from the end in imagination, daring to inhabit the state of fulfillment long before the world offered them evidence. Their boldness was their strength, and their assumption their power. To dare boldly is to exercise faith, and faith is not passive belief but active assumption. Faith says, "It is so," and abides in that state until the outer reflects it. Faith does not ask when, how, or through whom the result will come. Faith knows that consciousness is the only reality, and what is assumed inwardly must unfold outwardly. Boldness is faith clothed in courage, the refusal to be swayed by appearances, the unshakable commitment to inner truth. To assume inwardly means to live in imagination, as though the wish is fulfilled. You create the scene that would imply your desire accomplished, and you enter it with all the vividness and conviction of feeling. You see what you would see, hear what you would hear, feel what you would feel if your dream were already realized. The more daringly you occupy that state, the more powerfully it imprints itself upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being the creative power, must objectify it in the outer world. There is no force in heaven or earth that can prevent the manifestation of a conviction once it is accepted as natural by the subconscious mind. The difficulty lies not in the law, but in the boldness of the dreamer. Most hesitate. They retreat into half measures, imagining timidly, hoping faintly, waiting for outer confirmation before committing inwardly. But the law does not respond to half-hearted assumption. It responds to boldness, to conviction, to the daring inner declaration that it is done. To dare boldly is to strip away hesitation and to clothe yourself fully in the end result. It is to walk as the one who already has, to think as the one who already is, to feel as the one who already knows. Bold assumption carries with it a sense of inevitability. It is not strained or anxious, but calm and confident. You do not push the river, you rest in the assurance that the river is already flowing. You do not demand results. You know results are inevitable because the inner state is already secured. Boldness is not desperation, but certainty. The quiet yet unshakable knowing that what is assumed inwardly must appear outwardly. This is why persistence is vital. The outer world may take time to catch up, but the bold soul does not waver. Appearances may contradict, delays may arise, circumstances may seem hostile, yet the bold assumption remains unmoved. Each return to the inner vision strengthens it, each rehearsal of the fulfilled desire deepens the conviction, until it becomes the most natural state of being. When it feels natural, it is done, for naturalness is the hallmark of manifestation. Boldness is also freedom from the tyranny of appearances. To live by appearances is to live as a slave to shadows, but to dare boldly is to recognize appearances as temporary, and to trust the inner reality as eternal. Shadows must follow substance, and the substance is your assumption. The moment you assume boldly, you set in motion a chain of events that will, by law, culminate in the outer reflection of that assumption. It may come in ways you cannot predict, through channels you cannot foresee, but come it must, for consciousness never fails to express itself. To dare boldly requires imagination and discipline. You must enter into the scene of fulfillment with the willingness to abandon the old self and embrace the new. You must refuse to indulge in thoughts of lack or limitation, for to do so is to water the weeds of doubt. Instead, you must consistently water the seed of assumption with feeling, faith, and persistence. The bold gardener does not dig up the seed to see if it is growing. He trusts the process, knowing that growth is certain. So too must you trust the unseen workings of your conviction, knowing that the outer world is already rearranging to match your inner state. Bold assumption is not arrogance but alignment with the law of life. Arrogance demands from others, assumption declares within. Arrogance looks outward for validation. Assumption knows inwardly. To dare boldly is to recognize yourself as the creative power, to cease begging the world to give you what you already possess in imagination, and to instead live from the truth that you are the source. When you dare boldly, you step into your divine inheritance as creator. You no longer shrink before circumstances, but command them through inner conviction. You no longer wait for life to hand you opportunities, but generate them by the force of assumption. You no longer hope for change, but embody it, and by embodying it, you compel life to mirror it. To dare boldly is to know that your inner world is sovereign, and your outer world must obey. What you assume inwardly must appear outwardly because the world is your consciousness objectified. It is law, unchanging and impartial. The bold assumption is not reckless but creative, not fanciful but foundational. To dare boldly is to trust the unseen over the seen, the invisible over the visible, the eternal law over the temporary shadow. And when you live with such daring, life itself bends to your conviction, for it can do no other.